In today's video, I'm going to be talking about some of the challenges that people face as they attempt to transition from their working career into retirement. It's a fact that the majority of people, even when they're financially ready, struggle with the thought of stopping their career and moving into that next phase of life. So in this video today, I'm going to go over some research that covers the psychological, social, and financial reasons why people struggle to make that transition. And make sure to watch until the very end, because I'm going to share some practical ways that you can address each of these issues that I found from my experience working with thousands of retirees over my career in financial planning. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. When people prepare for retirement, I would say that the majority of folks are focused on the financial aspect of it. They're saving, they're investing, they're getting themselves ready, paying off debt, so that when they get to this kind of, I don't know, something like in their late 50s, 60s, something like that, they feel comfortable financially. Although what I have found is that as people approach this point in time, and maybe especially those that have done well financially, as they reach this point, all of a sudden they face these kind of other hurdles that they did not anticipate when they first started preparing for retirement. If you'd asked somebody earlier in their career and said, hey, let's imagine that you're 60 years old, you've got a couple $1,000,000, no debt, would you retire? I think most people would say, well, of course I would. Let's do it. However, people, whether they've got $1,000,000 or more than that or even less than that, once they get to that stage and they're financially, everything looks like they're good to go, they still find themselves struggling to actually make that transition. It's not something that is, unique. It's surprising, I guess I would say, but it's not unique to any particular demographic. And in fact, it's something I've seen with clients and people that I've worked with, thousands of people over the years. And it's interesting, as part of this video, I did some extra research to see what, smarter minds have found on the topic. And I've actually found some research from across the globe, from Europe and from a journal in Africa, going over these exact issues that I thought, oh, maybe they're just unique to Americans, but it turns out they're kind of universal things that people struggle with. So I'm kind of excited to share these ideas with you. So first, what I want to talk about are some of the let's call them psychological issues that people face. There's research about this from all over the globe. One of the topics are psychological factors that kind of get in the way of somebody retiring, transitioning into retirement. So in the European Management Journal, there's an article published by Manfred Katz-Doivries, and he goes over what he calls, I guess I would categorize these, according to his research, kind of all under the umbrella of identity crisis. So someone's been working their whole life, and your whole identity, self-worth is all kind of wrapped up, is very tightly linked with your success as a professional. And so he goes over a few things that I think are great. First thing he talks about is your loss of social standing and respect. So there's fear that, okay, now that I'm no longer working, I'm going to lose my, my position. I'm not going to be, I'm going to be looked down on. I'm no longer going to have that, kind of social clout.
You are not special.
And professional clout that I once had. And that can be scary to, kind of voluntarily take that step down, or, the perception that you're going to take that step down. The next is just the loss of identity with, if you've got some job title, you're the CEO or the CFO or the director of this or that. And to go from, being the director of operations to being the director of what are we going to have for lunch today? That can be difficult to, to contemplate. The other thing he talks about is, just the fear of irrelevance, that, you're just going to kind of fade away into obscurity. And, in fact, he uses the word having feelings of nothingness, which feels quite bleak and dire. But these are real feelings that people could have, whether or not they're able to, really articulate them or not. That feeling of, loss of self-worth and sense of self, that's a challenge. I would say that if you're facing some of these challenges, or, you've just got that general discomfort with the idea of letting go of your professional standing, I would say maybe as a bit of consolation that if you are experiencing that, you're not the only person who's feeling that. There's a lot of people that are in the middle of feeling that or have gone through it themselves. The next area that's a challenge for people as they're transitioning into retirement is a loss of kind of that social standing. So for many people, their friends, the people that they do things with for social events or, travel even, and all sorts of stuff, is all tied up. Their entire social network is tied up in their, in their career. And this is actually coming out of the Pan-African Medical Journal, an article published back in 2022. And so what they found is that for retirees who found themselves kind of on the other end of, once they were retired, that were happier and doing better, they cited having having good social relationships outside of their careers as being the number one factor that's led to their their well-being. So building your social network and having relationships outside of your career, and frankly, I would even say this, you've been working with certain people for a long time. Those relationships, I would say, they don't necessarily have to end. If there's relationships you really value, then perhaps, those relationships are going to change once you retire, but those relationships could still certainly continue. And the last item that I want to talk about are those financial anxieties. So in a recent article published in the Wall Street Journal by Ann Turgeson, she's a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. She talks about this. She wrote an article about the spending and savings paradox, this anxiety that even, wealthy retirees, people that have done well financially, still have a lot of financial anxiety about retirement. And this article cites, 47% of retirees have anxiety about their finances, and this 47% of people with over $1 million saved for retirement. And then 31%, or at least a third of those people, are also very concerned about running out of money in retirement. And this leads to some pretty interesting things. So what her article cites is that for retirees with over $1 million, that on average they're spending 2.1% of their portfolio annually, as opposed to something, even if you took like a rule of thumb approach, like 4%. And if you watch in my videos, you'll note that in many cases you could spend a much higher percentage, at least for a period of time, than 4%. And so to only spend 2.1%, you can see that, what she insinuates is that it's this fear of running out of money that keeps people from spending maybe what they would be able to. There's also this issue of transitioning from savings to spending. And so you've gone your entire life saving diligently, living below your means to build up a nest egg. And it can be tremendously difficult to just kind of break that and all of a sudden say, okay, now I'm going to spend this. And that can be quite difficult to even contemplate it, let alone actually put it into practice. So now that we've covered these three areas of psychological, social, and financial anxieties and real fears that people have around retirement, I want to go over just a few things that I found working with retirees that I think are going to be helpful. And I'm just taking this from my experience. I'm actually very curious, anybody watching, and if you want to put down in the comments some things that have really helped you transition from your career into retirement. Maybe you're looking back a year or more than a year of experience being retired and you feel like things are going well for you. I'd love to hear about maybe some of the things that you found pretty helpful. And so I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, so my, professional training and my professional experience is all around kind of the financial aspect of retirement. So for me, frankly, I feel most comfortable and confident addressing that particular area. And I would say that those fears about running out of money, one thing that I know is helpful for people is that when they're looking at retirement, putting together a retirement plan and rigorously stress testing that plan. So, simply put, if you take your plan, you look at every aspect of it. Don't just look at your investments, but looking at all of your income sources, doing a deep dive into your Social Security benefits, into your Medicare, into any pensions you might have, other income streams that you might have, potential inheritance that you might receive. Also, all of your potential expenses, right? Like, so looking at healthcare expenses, looking at, are you wanting to help children, or do you still have a parent who's living that you're kind of helping out financially? So looking at every aspect of your, financial life, or, soon to be financial life as a retiree, and then stress testing that through lots and lots of different scenarios. What if markets do horribly? What if they do really well? And kind of everything in between to get a very good sense of, okay, what is realistic here? There's no silver bullet, right? We don't know what the future is going to hold for us. But I think realistically, if your financial plan, if it would have held up during, the worst economic environments over the last 150 years, then I think it's safe to say that can give you a pretty good amount of confidence about the future. Interesting, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but as it relates to kind of this financial anxiety about the future, one thing I found very common with retirees is you'll have one spouse who's really into the numbers. They're always looking at the retirement account balances and the investment portfolio. They're watching videos like this, researching the topic, etc. And they've maybe they're using an online software tool like Bowden's a really popular one, or there's other ones out there. I'm not making an endorsement, just whatever. There's stuff that people use. And they're like, you know what? I'm feeling pretty good. Like, I think we're really going to be all right as far as our finances go. But then their spouse, who's a little less, is not like super into the finances, they are looking over at their spouse like, but are you sure? But are you really sure we're going to be okay? And that can be kind of, sometimes within a couple, it'll be one person is feeling pretty confident, the other one's not feeling as confident. And it can really, really help to just get a second set of eyes, have a professional review your plan and kind of give you the like, yeah, you're actually in really good shape, or think about maybe tweaking this or that, but all things that we can tell you're in really good shape. So rigorously stress testing your retirement plan, covering all the angles to make sure you're not leaving anything out, I think can help you feel less anxious from the financial perspective about retirement. A second aspect from the financial standpoint is what I like to call creating a license to spend. I didn't come up with this, but I love the way that that's phrased. It comes from some research done by David Blanchett. He's got lots of stuff online you can read about. But when you put together a financial plan for retirement, you don't start with what's your budget going to be for retirement, but just start with, based on your income and your assets and everything you've saved and your expenses, what is a realistic amount that you could sustainably spend for the next 30 years, 35 years, depending on your age. If you're a really, really young retiree, you might even look at like 40 years. And once you've come up with that sustainable number, deriving income from, your portfolio, other income sources, Social Security benefits, that sort of thing. And then looking at that number, I find that most people are quite surprised, and that number is often higher than kind of their budget that they've planned for in retirement. And so seeing that maybe you have the capacity to spend at this level, and even though maybe, you're only planning or really think you only need, something lower than that, that can provide a lot of financial peace of mind, knowing that, oh wow, I could actually, if I wanted to, or if we wanted to, we could spend this higher amount. And you may choose not to, but in the back of your mind, you've got kind of this wiggle room built into your plan that even if things go, horribly wrong, you could be spending more than you thought you could. And the last thing that I'll say from the psychological and the social perspective, I've seen this a lot with clients over the years. So a couple of things. The first thing I want to say is it's very helpful to start building relationships and your social identity outside of work. So if you have hobbies or other things that, are not just superficial, the things that are really important to you. And for a lot of people, I find it's their family. So if you have children or grandchildren, getting really into helping them, mentoring them, with their careers and with their lives, that can provide just a tremendous amount of satisfaction and meaning and purpose for yourself. And if you don't have kids and grandkids and that sort of thing, or whether you do or not, getting involved in things that are really important to you and spending think about it, you've got your whole career, you've got all this experience, all this life experience. And so, yeah, it might, you've got a lot to offer outside of kind of a formal career, right? You can get involved in a lot of different things. So I would say what I have found when people get involved in the community doing stuff with, volunteering and that sort of thing, it can be very, very satisfying and really kind of help them bridge that gap of like, you know what, I'm not going to be working, I'm not going to be the CFO or the director of, XYZ, but I'm really going to have an impact. I've got some skills, I've got some street smarts from my life, my career. I'm gonna try and help out and help somebody else, and that can be very satisfying. And the last idea I have from like the psychological perspective is you can, in fact, recently I went through this with a client in New Jersey, is try test driving retirement. Retirement doesn't have to be an all or nothing, situation. So with this client, 55 years old, wanting to retire, financially good to go, but there's kind of in the back of the mind like, but I don't know, like, I think I've got plenty to do. I've got great plans for when I retire, but it's still kind of like, am I really going to enjoy doing it? And I'm young enough to where, I also could continue to work for a few more years very easily, and that would be just fine. So one thing you can do is test drive retirement. See if you can go, work part-time within your organization or a similar organization. Or with a lot of people that are more experienced, a lot is seeing if you can go into a contractor or a consultant role, either with your organization or with similar organizations, to where you're still connected into kind of the, the profession that you've got all your experience in, but now you have more flexibility over your time, and it's much easier to kind of continue working or to call it or to just kind of end it whenever you're ready to do so. So that's another way that you can kind of test the waters and see how retirement would feel with more free time. Incorporating some of these other things is by just simply test driving retirement through one of these kind of transitional work type situations. So hopefully this video has been helpful in giving you some insights into some of the common reasons why people struggle with that transition, not just financially, but some of the other, things that challenge people from all over the world. So if you'd like some help with some of these ideas, maybe have a second look at your retirement plan or help you think through how to do some of these transitions and challenges, feel free to click the link in the description below. Happy to meet with you. And until next time, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon.